If you woke up this morning feeling that life should be better than it is, you're right. But here's the catch. Life doesn't improve by chance. It improves by standards. I learned a long time ago that the world doesn't give you what you wish for. It gives you what you're willing to accept. And the day you stop accepting small habits, small excuses, and small thinking, that's the day your life begins to rise. See, human beings are strange creatures. We want magnificent results while holding on to ordinary standards. We want success to change our life while refusing to change the rules we live by. But listen carefully. Your standards are the thermostat of your life. Set them low, and everything around you stays cold. Raise them, even just a little, and suddenly your world begins to warm. Opportunities appear, and people treat you differently. I'll tell you something psychological, something powerful. Humans don't do what's possible, they do what's acceptable. You rise to the level of your standards, and you fall to them too. And maybe, just maybe, the next chapter of your life is not waiting for more talent, or time, or luck. It's waiting for a new decision, a higher standard, a better rule, a different personal requirement. Because the moment you say, I will not live below this line anymore, life starts to open doors that were always there, just hidden behind your old standards. So today, let's talk about the magical transformative power of raising that line. There came a time in my life when I realized that earning more wasn't a matter of wishing, but of raising the standard I held for myself. Most people hope their income will rise before they rise, but it doesn't work that way. The marketplace is an honest judge. It pays for value, not desire. I remember working jobs where I was paid just enough to survive until the day I asked myself a simple question. What would happen if I made myself indispensable? Not average, not replaceable, indispensable. That question changed everything because it pushed me to raise the standard of what I expected from my own performance. When you decide that your earning standard is no longer tied to comfort but to contribution, your value begins to expand. I started learning new skills, profitable skills, each season. One quarter it was communication, another it was sales, another it was leadership. I wasn't waiting for someone to hand me a raise. I was building myself into the kind of person the marketplace rewards. And every time I delivered more than I was paid for, something remarkable happened. Opportunities began to chase me instead of the other way around. I tracked the value I created each week, not the hours I worked. Hours don't determine income, value does. And when I saw those small improvements stacking up, I knew I had lifted the ceiling on what I could earn. You raise your income by raising your standards, and you raise your standards by deciding you'll never again settle for doing just enough. There was a season in my life when I finally understood that the greatest limitation on my income wasn't the economy, or my job, or even my circumstances. It was me. And the moment that truth settled in, I realized something just as powerful. If I grew, everything in my life would grow with me. Most people try to increase their income without increasing themselves, but that's like trying to pour a gallon into a cup. You don't expand your earnings until you expand your capacity. And that capacity is built through daily, deliberate, personal growth, not the occasional burst of motivation that fades as quickly as it arrives. I made a simple decision. Every day, 1 hour of learning. Not when it was convenient, every day. I turned my car into a classroom. Every commute became a seminar. Every waiting moment became an opportunity to sharpen the mind. I listened to ideas from people who were living the results I wanted, because if you expose your mind to bigger thinking long enough, your life eventually rises to match it. I would choose one wealth-building book each month, not to decorate my shelf, but to reshape my philosophies. I realized that every book held a piece of wisdom that could shorten my learning curve and lengthen my success. Growth became my new standard. Not yesterday's knowledge, not yesterday's habits, new growth each day. And something remarkable happened. Opportunities expanded because I expanded. When you grow daily, your world grows with you, and your income simply follows the person you are becoming. There was a turning point in my early financial life when I realized I wasn't broke because I lacked money. I was broke because I lacked clarity. I didn't truly know where my dollars were going, and money, like anything unmanaged, quietly slips through your fingers. The moment I understood that you cannot improve what you do not measure, everything began to change. Most people think their problem is income, but often their real problem is blindness. They're walking through their financial life in the dark, hoping things will somehow improve, but hope is not a strategy, clarity is. I decided to track every expense for 30 days, every coffee, every meal, every unnecessary convenience that disappeared from my wallet. At first it felt tedious, then it became enlightening. Patterns emerged. Habits I didn't even realize were draining my financial strength. And once I saw the truth on paper, I could no longer pretend I didn't know. That awareness alone elevated my discipline. I began reviewing my finances every Sunday, not as a burden, but as a habit of leadership. You should treat your money the same way a business treats its cash flow, with attention, precision, and intention. When you look at your numbers weekly, you take control. You begin to steer instead of drift. You start making decisions based on reality, not emotion. Financial clarity brings power. Power to correct, power to plan, power to grow. When you know where every dollar comes from and where it goes, you stop being surprised by your finances and start being in charge of them. Clarity is the first step toward mastery. I learned early that the future is not something you stumble into, it's something you build twice, first in the mind, then in the marketplace. Before I ever earned my first significant check, I had already seen the life I wanted in vivid detail, not as a vague wish, not as a casual hope, but as a clear, deliberate vision. Most people want wealth, but their vision is foggy, and a foggy vision produces foggy results. The mind must construct the future long before the hands can bring it into reality. That's why strengthening your vision for wealth isn't optional, it's foundational. I sat down one evening and wrote out a 10-year financial vision. Not just numbers, but the kind of life those numbers would allow me to live. Where I would live, how I would contribute, what my investments would look like, who I would become in the process. The more detailed the picture became, the more my daily habits began to shift. When the future is clear, the present becomes purposeful. Each morning, I would revisit that vision, not as fantasy, but as instruction. I allowed it to shape my decisions, my behavior, my discipline. It's hard to drift when you have a destination in front of you every day. And that's the secret. Your actions must rise to meet your vision. When your daily behavior matches your future picture, wealth stops being something you chase and becomes something you inevitably grow into. Vision strengthens your direction, and direction determines your destiny. There was a time when I believed wealth arrived in big moments, major opportunities, sudden breakthroughs, lucky timing. But life has a way of teaching you the truth in a very practical way. Wealth isn't built in events, it's built in the quiet, consistent habits no one sees. Discipline becomes the architect of your financial future. The same way a tree grows ring by ring, wealth grows decision by decision. And when I finally understood that, I stopped waiting for a miracle and started developing daily disciplines that carried far more impact than the occasional surge of motivation. One of the first standards I set was simple: save before spending. Not after the bills, not after the impulse purchases, before anything else. That single decision taught me control, and control is the foundation of financial strength. Then I automated my investments, not when I felt inspired, not when the market looked exciting, every month, without exception. By making it automatic, I removed emotion from the process, and emotion is the enemy of disciplined wealth building. Every week, I reviewed my progress. I treated my finances the same way a gardener tends to a crop: consistent checking, small adjustments, steady care. Those weekly reviews held me accountable, showing me whether I was drifting or staying on course. What surprised me most was how these small disciplines compounded, slowly at first, almost invisibly, and then suddenly with tremendous momentum. You don't need dramatic changes to alter your financial life. You need consistent ones. Discipline turns small steps into large results. When your habits become stronger than your excuses, wealth begins to grow almost naturally. There came a moment in my life when I finally understood that success is rarely an individual achievement, it's an environmental one. You rise to the expectations of the people around you, or you fall to match their habits. I noticed that every time I spent too much time around those who complained, blamed, or feared the future, my own ambition began to shrink. Not because I wanted it to, but because the environment was stronger than my will. It's a quiet truth. You become the average of your financial circle long before you realize it. If the conversations around you are small, your results will be small. If the people around you doubt possibility, you will begin to doubt it too. So I started upgrading my associations. I joined business groups where the conversations were about ideas, opportunities, and solutions instead of gossip and excuses. I remember sitting in a room where someone was discussing investments I had never even heard of, and suddenly my thinking stretched. When your mind expands, it can't shrink back to its old size. I attended seminars, not just for the information, but for the atmosphere of ambition. Being around people who believed in growth made me believe more strongly in my own potential. At the same time, I reduced my time with negative thinkers. Not out of superiority, but out of responsibility. You cannot build a wealthy life while keeping company with those committed to poverty thinking. Every association is either pulling you forward or pulling you back. When you upgrade your circle, you upgrade your standards. And when your standards rise, your life follows. Your environment is shaping you every day. Make sure it's shaping you upward. I learned early on that chasing money is a losing game. I used to hustle after every opportunity, reacting to what seemed urgent, hoping it would bring financial security. And yet the harder I chased, the more elusive it became. There is a profound truth. Money follows order, not emotion. When you manage it wisely, it multiplies quietly. When you let it drive you, it disappears in a frenzy of impulse and desire. The first step is to give every dollar a purpose before it leaves your hands. This is where control begins. I began by creating a spending plan. Every dollar had a role, some to cover essentials, some to invest, some to grow. I set up automatic transfers to savings and investment accounts, so discipline did not rely on willpower alone. This simple act turned money into a servant, not a master. Each month, I reviewed the allocations, asking, is this money serving me or am I serving it? I made rules for myself. No impulsive purchases above a certain amount, a fixed percentage to invest, and a portion for education. These rules became my framework, my personal financial compass. I remember a month when temptation came from every side. A new gadget, a flashy car, an expensive trip. Following the plan felt restrictive, yet by the end, I realized I had preserved capital that worked harder than I could in that time. Money, under order, grows silently. Money under chaos drains quietly. Learn to give it direction, automate its path, and treat it as a tool. Once you do, it stops controlling you and begins to expand your freedom. I learned early that true wealth is not about the balance in your bank account today, but about what endures when you're no longer around to spend it. Money spent only for fleeting pleasures vanishes, but money invested with foresight becomes a legacy, quietly working across generations. The philosophy is simple. Wealth that outlives you is wealth that compounds, teaches, and empowers beyond your lifetime. I realize that building such wealth requires deliberate thought, long-term discipline, and a vision that stretches beyond the immediate. The first step is to write down your wealth principles. Ask yourself, what do I stand for financially? What values should guide my decisions? This clarity shapes every choice, ensuring that each dollar serves a purpose beyond mere consumption. Next, focus on creating passive income streams. Real estate that generates cash flow, royalties from intellectual property, dividend-yielding investments. These are tools that continue producing value while you focus on other ventures, passions, or simply living. They are the hands that keep working even when you rest. Finally, pass on financial wisdom. Teach your children, mentees, or successors about the principles of money. Wealth is not only about accumulation, but about education and responsibility. I remember mentoring young people who had inherited nothing, yet developed habits that allowed them to thrive financially. Habits and principles often matter more than inheritance. Your legacy is not just the assets you leave behind, it is the mindset, discipline, and knowledge embedded in those who follow. Build with purpose, invest with foresight, and teach with intention, and your wealth will echo far beyond your own lifetime. I discovered early that relying on a single source of income is like walking a tightrope without a safety net. One slip can undo everything. True financial security and wealth come from building multiple pillars, streams that support each other and provide resilience against life's uncertainties. The philosophy is clear. One income may sustain you, but multiple streams build freedom, opportunity, and stability. The key is not to scatter your energy, but to build strategically and deliberately. The first step is to establish a primary, skill-based stream of income, something you control directly, where your effort and expertise translate into tangible results. For many, this is their profession or trade. Focus on delivering excellence here, mastering your craft, and maximizing the value you provide. This becomes the foundation of your financial house. Once that foundation is solid, it's time to add a second stream, investments. Whether in real estate, stocks, or other appreciating assets, this stream works while you sleep. Its purpose is to create wealth independent of your daily labor, compounding slowly but surely over time. Finally, a third stream comes from entrepreneurial ventures or business ownership. This is where leverage multiplies your efforts, systems, people, and technology work together to generate returns far beyond what one person alone could achieve. Each new income stream doesn't just add money, it adds security, flexibility, and freedom. I've seen people transform their lives by starting small, building one pillar at a time, and expanding deliberately. The lesson is timeless. Diversify your efforts, but always build with purpose, and the house of wealth you construct will stand strong for a lifetime. Early in my life, I learned a lesson about debt that changed my entire approach to money. Debt is not inherently evil, it's a tool. The philosophy is simple. There is good debt, which builds wealth, and bad debt, which buries you under obligations and stress. The problem is, most people treat debt as an extension of lifestyle, borrowing to consume rather than to create. True financial growth comes when you borrow with purpose, only to acquire assets that generate income, not liabilities that drain it. The first step is awareness. List every debt you carry, the interest rates, and the terms. Understanding the cost of debt is the foundation of control. Once you see the numbers clearly, eliminate consumer debt, credit cards, unnecessary loans, and anything borrowed for mere convenience. This step is critical because high-interest debt is a silent tax on your future. It steals potential wealth before it even has a chance to grow. Next, leverage only for investments that produce cash flow. Real estate that rents, a business that generates profit, or other appreciating assets can be financed intelligently, using other people's money to create personal freedom. This is the distinction between debt that enslaves and debt that empowers. I've seen people transform their finances by taking a calculated, disciplined approach. They eliminate what doesn't serve them, then borrow strategically to expand their opportunities. Debt, when used wisely, becomes a powerful ally rather than a hidden enemy. The principle is clear. Never borrow for comfort. Always borrow for creation. When you master this, your financial path becomes deliberate, secure, and accelerated, and the money that once constrained you now works for you. One of the earliest lessons I learned about money is that wealth, once lost, is almost impossible to recover quickly. The philosophy is simple but profound. Capital is the foundation of financial freedom. When protected, it grows steadily and reliably. When gambled recklessly, it disappears in the blink of an eye. Many people chase high returns without a thought for risk, believing opportunity is urgent and excitement equals success. That mindset leads to mistakes that set you back for years. The strategy, then, is to be defensive before you're aggressive. Before you chase the next big deal, before you invest in a shiny opportunity, ensure that your base is solid. Start with a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. This is not optional. It's a shield that gives you confidence and stability. Life will always throw unexpected challenges, medical emergencies, economic downturns, job changes, and having capital to weather these storms keeps your financial journey on track. Next, verify every source and understand every investment before putting your money at risk. If you cannot explain it clearly, or if the terms feel rushed or pressured, step back. Urgency is the enemy of caution. Wealth is rarely built in haste. It grows through informed, deliberate decisions. I have personally walked away from opportunities that seemed lucrative but carried hidden risks, and in hindsight, those were the choices that preserved my ability to invest in what truly mattered later. Protecting your capital first is not pessimism, it's discipline. It's acknowledging that money has power, but only when it is respected. Guard your resources, invest thoughtfully, and the growth that follows will be sustainable, consistent, and unstoppable. One of the most profound shifts in building wealth comes when you realize that effort alone has limits, but leverage has none. Philosophy teaches us that working harder will only take you so far. Your energy, time, and focus are finite. The true path to financial expansion is learning how to multiply your impact without multiplying your hours. Leverage is the key. Tools, technology, and teams that extend your reach and multiply your results. The strategy is simple in theory, but transformative in practice. Move from being a laborer to becoming a director of resources. Every minute you spend on tasks that can be delegated or automated is a minute lost from creating value that only you can provide. Early in my own journey, I realized that if I wanted to grow beyond a certain income ceiling, I needed others to share the work. I started by outsourcing small, repetitive tasks, freeing my time to focus on business development and high-value relationships. That one change multiplied the effectiveness of every decision I made. Next, Harness technology. Online systems, automation and software can manage repetitive workflows, track results, and even communicate with clients. These tools are silent employees, working around the clock without fatigue or distraction. Finally, delegation is an art. Find people who can perform tasks at or above your standard and trust them. Micromanaging defeats the purpose. Guiding and mentoring amplifies your influence. When you combine these elements, your hours are no longer limited by your body or mind. You create a system where income and results grow exponentially while your effort remains focused on what truly moves the needle. Leverage is the difference between working for money and having money work for you. There is a simple truth about time. It is the currency of wealth, and how you spend it determines the life you live. Philosophy tells us that wealth gravitates toward intentional hours, while poverty drifts along with wasted minutes. Busy people are often exhausted yet unproductive, running in circles without leaving a trace. The difference is purpose. Every hour you work without a clear objective is an hour surrendered to chance. To truly change your life, you must assign meaning to every block of time.